Roman law. I know. It sounds like something you'd find in a dusty old textbook, right? But what if I told you it's actually the invisible operating system running behind so much of our modern world? We're going to dive into the epic story of how a bunch of ancient customs grew into the single most influential legal system in all of history. Let's get into it.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract academic question. Things like contracts, property rights, even the very idea of a corporation, so many of these concepts trace their DNA right back to ancient Rome. So how on earth does a legal code that's 2 millennia old still shape the way we live and think about justice today?
Okay, so to really get a grip on this, you have to appreciate the sheer time span we're talking about. This legal tradition stretches all the way from the legendary founding of Rome around 753 BC through massive, game-changing projects like Justinian's Code in 534 AD, and its influence is still felt in legal systems all over the globe right now. It's incredible.
So, where did this whole thing even start? Well, it wasn't with courtrooms and lawyers and powdered wigs, that's for sure. It began with something much more basic, something you couldn't even read.
Think about it like this. In the very beginning, Roman law wasn't written down anywhere. It was basically the city's shared memory. It was a collection of unwritten rules, all tangled up with religious rituals and ancient traditions, passed down from father to son. It was just how things were done.
But here's the problem with a system that's all based on memory and tradition, right? It can be super easy for people in power to manipulate it, and that little flaw is exactly what lit the fuse for the first great legal revolution in Rome.
So, early Roman society was basically split into two camps. You had the patricians, they were the wealthy, aristocratic, powerful families, and then you had everyone else, the common folk, called the plebeians. And here was the massive problem. Only the patricians really knew and interpreted the unwritten laws, which of course meant things always seemed to work out in their favor. Eventually, the plebeians just got fed up and started demanding something radical. Write the laws down so everyone can see them.
And you really can't overstate how huge this was. I mean, imagine going from a system where the rules are literally a secret known only by the powerful to one where they're carved onto tablets and put in the middle of the city for everyone to see. This was a gigantic leap toward fairness and transparency. These 12 tables became the absolute bedrock of all Roman law that followed.
And don't think this was just some simple list of don't do this, don't do that. No way. The 12 tables were amazingly thorough for their time. They covered everything from how to conduct a trial, to family and inheritance law, to property rights, and what to do about crimes and injuries, what we'd call torts today. It was a serious, full-blown attempt to build a legal foundation for their whole society.
All right, so Rome's got its written laws. Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. A new, much bigger challenge was just around the corner. Rome was growing up. It wasn't just a city anymore. It was becoming a massive, multicultural empire.
See, the 12 tables were fantastic if you were a Roman citizen. But what about everyone else? As Rome expanded, all these traders, merchants, and conquered peoples, the Romans called them peregrini, started pouring in. And this created a huge legal headache. What laws applied to them? They weren't citizens, so technically they had no rights under the existing system. You can imagine how that would be bad for business and for keeping the peace.
So you had the original system, the esse civili, or the civil law. You can think of it like an exclusive club's rule book. It was rigid, it was formal, and you had to be a Roman citizen to get its protections. But the Romans were nothing if not pragmatic. So they came up with an absolutely brilliant solution, the ius gentium, or law of nations. This was a whole separate system of law. It wasn't based on your citizenship. It was based on principles of reason and fairness that they believed were common to all humanity. It was flexible, it was based on common sense, and it could be applied to a dispute between anyone, citizen, or foreigner. Just a totally groundbreaking idea.
And this wasn't just some vague idea either. They made it official. In 242 BC, they created a whole new government job, the Praetor Peregrinus. And this guy's entire purpose was to hear cases that involved foreigners, using this new flexible ius gentium. It just goes to show how good the Romans were at adapting their institutions to solve real-world problems.
This incredible innovation really set the stage for what we now call Roman law's golden age. Law was about to transform from just a set of rules into a deep, sophisticated science, all thanks to some of the most brilliant legal minds the world has ever seen. Okay, so now we're entering the classical period, and for the next 300 years or so, something really interesting happens. The law doesn't really grow because of new rules from the government. Instead, it evolves through the sheer brain power and interpretation of this elite group of legal experts they called the jurists. Now, these jurists, they weren't lawyers like you see on TV. They were usually wealthy noblemen who saw the study of law as a kind of public service. They'd issue these incredibly detailed legal opinions called responsa, and their work was so highly respected that their opinions eventually became binding on judges. And boy, did they write. They created a literal mountain of legal literature. Textbooks, case studies, commentaries, the whole shebang.
But, and this is a big but, all this genius created a whole new kind of problem. After centuries of these brilliant minds writing thousands upon thousands of opinions, you were left with a massive, disorganized pile of legal texts. The law was now incredibly sophisticated, but it was also a confusing mess, with different experts often flat-out contradicting each other.
Basically, the system had become a victim of its own success. It was a chaotic mess. It was time for one of history's greatest cleanup projects, led by one very ambitious emperor who decided enough was enough.
So, fast forward to the 6th century AD, when the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian takes the throne. He inherits a legal system that is, to put it mildly, a complete disaster. It was in what historians call a chaotic condition. You had piles of old, often contradictory imperial laws and an even bigger mountain of jurist writings. Trying to find the right law for a case was becoming almost impossible.
So Justinian decides to tackle this head-on. He launches this absolutely monumental project to gather, edit, and organize every last scrap of important Roman law into one single coherent collection. He called it the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of civil law. He broke the project into 3 parts. First, the Code, which organized all the imperial laws. Second, the Digest, which was a massive greatest hits collection of the jurists' writings. And third, the Institutes, which was basically Roman Law 101, a textbook for students.
And I really want you to understand the scale of what they did with the Digest. It's just mind-boggling. Justinian's team, led by this legal genius named Tribonian, took literally thousands of books and sorted them into 3 big piles, or masses. Then they went through something like 3 million lines of text, debating, cutting, and pasting excerpts to create the final 50-book masterpiece. And the craziest part? They did the whole thing in just 3 years.
And this right here is the big takeaway. This is why it all matters so much. Justinian's project didn't just clean up a messy system. It preserved 1,000 years of legal wisdom in a form that could survive. And when this Corpus Juris Civilis was rediscovered centuries later in Europe, it became the direct foundation for the legal systems of almost the entire continent. And from there, it spread across the world.
Which, it leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to ponder. What if Justinian had just not done it? What if he decided it was too big a job? It's entirely possible that this incredible legal tradition, this mountain of brilliant ideas, could have just been lost to time, crumbling away into a pile of forgotten, chaotic scrolls. Makes you think, doesn't it?